Welcome to the More Demand podcast, where we help you generate more demand for your products and services. Every episode we give you tips, tricks and tutorials on how to get the best out of your digital marketing. Less frustration, more demand. Here's your host Lawrence Howlett with this week's freshest tips.
Hello and welcome to the More Demand podcast, episode number 22, how to start a lead generating podcast with John Lee Dumas. 22 weeks ago when I started this podcast, I honestly couldn't have imagined being able to connect with some of the biggest industry thought leaders and influencers. But today, I'm delighted to bring you the king of podcasting himself, John Lee Dumas from EoFire.com. Since 2012, John has interviewed more than 1,200 of the world's most successful entrepreneurs and shared their journey on his podcast, EoFire. I was very privileged myself to be on episode number 1206. Go and check it out at EoFire.com. The knowledge his guests on EoFire impart on Fire Nation, which is his nickname for his audience, have resonated worldwide, and episodes have been downloaded more than 12 million times by listeners in 145 different countries in 2015 alone. Right now on this show, we're going to get a little slice of what it's like to be that successful, and we're going to learn how to start our very own podcast with topics like equipment, who should host the podcast, types of shows you can produce, topic brainstorming, monetization, and so much more. John is honestly an absolute legend in the podcasting world, so I'm very honored to have him on the More Demand podcast today. So without further ado, let's welcome John Lee Dumas from EoFire.com onto the call. Hi John, thanks so much for being on the More Demand podcast today.
Lawrence, there is no place I'd rather be, brother.
Thank you. So I was recently featured on EoFire episode 1206, and I got
you rock the mic.
Thank you. And I got a massive response from Fire Nation. They are 100% action takers.
I love Fire Nation.
So we got 168 subscribers from being featured on that podcast, and that just shows you some of the power podcasting has. So I just wanted to, get your opinion on what podcasting's done for you.
Yeah, especially when you think about those numbers, because you have a very targeted, a very specific, and very niched offer, product, service. And so to think that 168 people actually took action on that, just shows you the just the breadth and the width that podcasting can have on an audience in so many different levels. So I love podcasting for all of those reasons, because for me, people are choosing to press play on that content. So they're not just ripping through a news feed on Facebook or Instagram and tapping like. They're like, hey, I want to listen to EoFire today. And they're pressing play and they're hearing your story, Lawrence, your worst moment, your aha moment, what you have going on right now. They're engaged. And just to kind of wrap up this little part right here, people can say yes to podcasting without having to say no to other things. Meaning you can go for a run, be driving in the car, be folding laundry, whatever you're doing, you can be still doing that thing while listening to a podcast and being fully engaged and immersed, where you can't be basically on a live video feed or reading a blog post, doing those specific activities. So that's the kind of the very cool little niche part of the market that podcasting has. And I love this medium.
Yeah, for sure. So what typical results are you seeing from your podcast and from other people that, are involved maybe in some of your courses, which we'll get onto later, Podcast at Paradise. But, what are some of the results that people are getting, from a business point of view with podcasting?
As basically a entrepreneur, what is one of the main things you're looking to do? You're looking to build credibility and authority in an area that you can deliver value in. Now, any of us can be or say that we're an authority figure and a credibility, and a person with a lot of credibility. But how do you really get that across to a potential audience? Well, being a podcast host allows you to do that in so many different ways. You can really just deliver incredible value personally as a topic-based podcast, bring guests on that can bring a ton of value, then you can add to it as the host, as the broadcast host, driving and guiding them through that. And then you're going to be building up this rapport, this know, like, and trust. So I'm at the point now with Fire Nation where I've delivered over 1,200 interviews in over 1,200 days because it's a daily podcast. So every single day I've delivered that content, that when I say like, hey, this is a good product or a good service, like Fire Nation just instinctually now trust me, and they'll go, and if it makes sense for them, they'll make that investment decision. So now I really have this audience that knows, likes, and trusts me. It looks at me as an authority figure in an area, but then also looks at me as a trusted figure when I recommend other things. So, we generate a lot of money on our own products and services, but we also generate a lot of money on affiliate and joint ventures that we do. So those are two big parts that as a podcast host, you can really look to grow, because it all stems from that connection with an audience.
And that connection you mentioned, obviously, you're the host, I'm the host of the More Demand podcast. In a business setting, who should be the host of a podcast? Should it be the business owner, if we're looking at a big team, or should it be someone in the marketing department, or should they maybe bring someone in, or, because there's lots of people who are simply just afraid to get behind the mic.
Absolutely. So it really should be somebody that is in that office, like not bringing an outside person in. Like, you want somebody that's in there. It doesn't have to be the big wig XYZ. Like, that person has a lot of things to do, and maybe this isn't something that he has the bandwidth for, or she has the bandwidth for, and that is totally A-okay. But somebody on that team has the gift for gab. Somebody in that department, that business, that area can flip on a mic and say, hey, this is an area that I'm going to help out our team by delivering free, valuable, and consistent content on our topic, on our specialty where we want to grow authority in. So to answer the question, if you bring in an outside person, like, you're just building authority and credibility with the wrong person. You're building it with that outside person. But if you do it with the team, then you're doing it the right way. So if, again, that head honcho person, guy or girl, wants to be that voice, that'd be amazing. But if they don't, it can be amazing as well.
Yeah, sure. And what's some of the minimal equipment that you need to get started? Like, I know in an open plan office, that is not the place to record a podcast. So what sort of equipment and what sort of space and mindset do you need to even get started with this?
Yeah. So, a lot of people think you need a ton to actually start a podcast that sounds good, that, feels good, that comes off with, professional, et cetera. But the reality is this: all you need is a computer, a microphone, and recording and editing software. Those three components. Now, most people have access to a computer. When it comes to a microphone, my number one recommendation for the low cost is $30. It's a Logitech Clear Chat, and you can get that on Amazon. $30. It's a USB, plugs into your USB port. Boom, you're off to the races. If you want to go another step up, I highly recommend the ATR 2100. That's $60, my friends. Again, it's another USB, so it will just plug right into your USB port in your computer, and you're off to the races with great audio sound quality. And I know Lawrence, my friends, is going to link all of this up in the show notes, so just look no further than that.
Of course.
And then the recording and editing software, and it's not that hard. You can use Audacity, which is free. You can use a great tool called Ecamm Call Recorder. If you're on a Mac, they will just record any Skype call that you're on, and you're off to the races. And if you want to get a little more in-depth, another great link to look for in the show notes is freepodcastcourse.com. I break down all of this in detail with video tutorials. It's completely free, freepodcastcourse.com.
So yeah, just take us through that free podcasting course, because that was a note that was going to come up later. So we may as well dive into that right now and walk through, what that's done for your business in terms of building your mailing list, and how's that, changed the dynamic of maybe just taking someone from a listener into someone that you can interact with.
See, it's a great question, because this is the reality, my friends, is that we are all looking to grow our leads and to have more lead generation and to make it in a very targeted way. You don't just want any leads, you want targeted leads. So what did I do? I created a completely free, very valuable, very successful course called freepodcastcourse.com. So now people that are taking that course, it's completely free. All they need to do is enter their email in, and over the course of 15 days, they'll receive 15 emails with another video tutorial about how to create, grow, and monetize their podcast. So over the course of the last year, we've grown that email list to over 25,000 people. So
wow.
Now that's an incredibly targeted list, because those are people that are raising their hands and saying, I want to learn how to podcast. So now when we throw our bi-weekly podcast courses. We have actually their webinars. We call them the podcast workshop. It's a completely free hour of training where at the end of that training, we do pitch Podcasters Paradise, which is our premium community. So every other week, we're having this workshop. We're emailing this list of 25,000 people that have taken free podcast course and said, hey, you've taken free podcast course. If you want to take it to the next level, we're having a completely free workshop this coming Wednesday. Sign up here, and hundreds of people show up. We're converting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 at times on this webinar into Podcasters Paradise, having that consistent, organic, free lead generation mechanism over and over and over again.
And that is just recurring revenue that's there. It can scale beyond belief as well. It doesn't matter if 10 people sign up, 20, 50, 100, it's scalable completely. So that business model is, for a lot of us, that is the pinnacle of what we want to get to, I think.
Yeah, totally pinnacle.
So how do you decide on some show topics? So once we've decided we want to do podcasts, we've got our equipment and we're there in front of the mic, what happens now?
So you can decide on what kind of show you want to do. I mean, do you want to do an interview-based show? Because then you don't have to stress about the show topic too much, because you can just talk to the guest about what they're an authority in. You can just have a normal conversation, and that conversation is like a coaching call, and that's very valuable. Now, if you do want to have a topic-based show, like what is that show going to be about? Like what value do you want to bring? Like what areas that you want to be an authority in, so you talk about topics that will make you an authority in that area. And again, you're looking to bring in targeted leads, not just any lead. So you want to really be sure that you are being specific and niche in that content that you are providing. Critical on so many levels. So targeted content across the board. That's so key. So again, you can do the interview-based show, the topic-based show. Another great option is the Q&A show. Maybe you have a lot of customers, have them call in with questions. You can answer them. That helps you get inside the head of your customers, which is amazing. Or why not have a variety show of all three? Because that's fun too. You can kind of mix and match. Maybe you have one interview a week, one question a week, and one topic a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If that's the kind of thing that works for you, like that variety show can bring a lot of entertainment into that podcast.
Yeah, and that cadence, should I do one a month? Should I do one a week? Should I do more than one a week? I mean, you're doing one a day. How does that stack in your schedule? Because I'll be honest, More Demand podcast listeners, I struggle to do one a week sometimes, and I'm right up to the go live point sometimes. So how do you fit that into your diary, doing one a day?
Well, you kind of nailed the word right there. It's called stack. And the actual word that I use, that again is really the same word as stack, but I call it batching. I'm all about batching. I do a daily show. Now, what does that look like? Well, for a while, it was having to do a couple shows every couple days and just make it work, because I was hustling and I was just out there hustling. But what did that turn into? Well, as I started to grow some credibility and authority in the podcasting world, and people started seeking me out to be on my show, I could then dictate when the interviews happen. So now I send people a link and said, hey, I'd love you to be on my show. Click here, find a time that works for you. So now, and this is going to sound crazy, and it didn't start like this, by the way, but now the first Monday and the first Tuesday of every month. So the first and second Monday and Tuesday of every month. So those 2 days, I do 15 interviews on Monday and 15 interviews on Tuesday, back to back.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you, just like you say, wow, when you say like that guy just did an Ironman. Wow. Well, of course you would say that, because you can't run an Ironman. I can't run an Ironman because I haven't trained for it. It's all about building up the stamina, building up the energy, and just kind of getting into it. So I've built up the stamina where I can do 15 interviews in one day and knock them all out of the park. I couldn't do that day one. I couldn't do that day 100. I couldn't do that day 1000. I'm on day 1300 right now. I've built up to this. For a while it was 8 interviews one day a week, but that kind of anchored me a little bit to that one day every single week. So then I pushed it back to 10 interviews on 3 consecutive days. And then when I felt comfortable there, I bumped it back to 15 interviews 2 days a week. And that's where I sit right now. Wow.
I mean, that's got to take some voice training just to start off with.
Yeah, it's called podcasting. That's your voice training, podcasting.
So now we've got our show. We've maybe recorded our first episode. We've interviewed a guest, or we've had a Q&A call, something like that. What do we do with the podcast after we've recorded it? And we want to get it out there. We want to get people to listen to it. What happens next?
So there's a whole grow section within the free podcast course that I get into really in depth about the best ways to grow your podcast audience. So the real serious people here, Lawrence, are going to go take that completely free course, and you're going to get a ton of free content from that.
Perfect.
But just to kind of share right now some things, I mean, you need to know where your customers are. You need to know where your customers are. Like, that is so critical. Like, where's your perfect listener? Where's your customer? Where is that quote unquote avatar, as I refer to it? Then you go to those places and you provide value. Now, here's a random example. Let's say that your podcast is about fishing in Northwest Canada. Okay. Well, there's killer, free, public, thriving Facebook groups right now all about fishing in Northwest Canada, as there is about everything else in this world. There's free, public, thriving groups in Google+, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it, it's there right now. You need to go out there and find them, become a person of value in those groups. And then when the time is right and you've proven your value, then you can reach out and say, hey, I actually answered that question on episode 12 of my podcast. And they'll be like, oh, you have a podcast? Like, what's the deal? What's the link? Well, then you link it up and everybody in that group's going to be flocking, because who in a group about fishing in Northwest Canada wouldn't want a podcast to listen to a podcast about fishing in Northwest Canada while they're fishing, probably. So
that's the ideal. Yeah,
exactly. So go to where your people are.
I mean, that's so important of any sort of marketing tactic, I suppose. You've got to understand who you're targeting, why you're targeting them, what they want, and then where they're hanging out and how to get to them. That's the principle that you can take from podcasting or from any marketing tactic, I guess.
So true.
So from there, we've got some people to our podcast now. We're building up our subscribers, which is the important keyword there. How do we either monetize a podcast or make it generate, those high quality sales leads that we want?
Okay, again, totally great question. Tons of great feedback and tutorials on this in the free podcast course. But here's some general ways that you can monetize a podcast. Number one is mentoring one-on-one. That was the first way that I mentored. Like, when people heard my voice and they said, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about on some levels. Let's bring, I'd love to do what he's doing. Let's bring him into my world and have him mentor me. So I did that from day one. And that was a great way for me to actually monetize in a very powerful way. So that's one great way. Another way is to create an elite mastermind. People wanted to be surrounded by other people that were listening to EoFire. So I created Fire Nation Elite, and that was a public mastermind for 2.5 years. It was generating 5 figures a month in recurring revenue. Wow. Sponsorships was another way. I have tons of sponsors on my show that are looking to get in front of Fire Nation.
99 Designs.
99 Designs, Squarespace, LegalZoom, keep it going. Just enter promo code FIRE for everything that you do. It's basically the answer to that question. So sponsorships is absolutely huge, and product services and community. Product services and community. So when you are building an audience, you ask that audience, what are you struggling with? They'll tell you their pain points, their obstacles, their challenges, and then you create the solution in the form of that product, service, or community, and you're off to the races. So that's how I created Podcasters Paradise, and that's how I created Webinar on Fire, and most recently, the Freedom Journal.
Wow, yeah. In fact, I've got the Freedom Journal, and looking into that and seeing if I can implement that myself. It's certainly taking you on a journey to it. Is that? I mean, you've had a couple of books out, but is this sort of your new sort of pinnacle of what you've created, do you think?
Yes, I would say absolutely to that question.
So, talk me through the Freedom Journal, because it is a lot about mindset. Even if, the Freedom Journal is pitched towards creating your podcast might be the thing that you want to do in the Freedom Journal. It's a more of a general business book rather than or a personal goal book than just about podcasting.
Yeah. So for me, this is back in January of 2015. Like, I realized that all of my successful guests, entrepreneurs who were successful, they had one thing in common. They knew how to set and accomplish goals. And I realized that my listeners who were struggling with that very thing. So I wanted to kind of create the solution to that problem. Just like I shared a couple minutes ago about monetizing, I was listening to my listeners, and they told me what the problem was, and I wanted to create the solution for them. And that was in the form of a journal that would be that guide to actually teach them how to set and accomplish their number one goal in 100 days. So one specific goal in a time-bound period, 100 days. So like, what does that look like? What does that mean exactly? Well, this is the reality, is that so many people have so many goals and no time frame for that. They just kind of wake up 6 months later and they're like, wow, I feel like I'm doing work every day, but I'm not really getting anywhere. So this is cutting through all that and is just saying, hey, knock over that one big domino that's there in your life to start that chain reaction of awesome. And the Freedom Journal is a unique step-by-step process of how to do that. I launched it to the public on January 4th, 2016 on Kickstarter. In 33 days, which was the length of our campaign, we raised $453,000 to become the 6th most funded publishing campaign of all time on Kickstarter. So it was really a success, but I have to attribute it all to listening to my listeners, because I just created the solution to what they needed.
And I think that's so important for anyone out there that's wanting to create a product that's going, I've just got this product idea in my head, and that might be a good idea, but you've actually gone to your audience, listened to what they want rather than what you want to give them necessarily, and focused on them all the time rather than, looking at yourself and saying, I just want to do that.
Right.
And obviously you've created the Freedom Journal. You've created this free podcast course. You're doing Entrepreneur on Fire. You must be a super busy man with a ton on the to-do list, right? So what does your typical day look like in terms of, outside the 2 days at the start of the month where you're recording those 15 back to back, and I guess on the Wednesday you just sleep all day. So apart from that, what does your typical day look like?
Yeah, so my day honestly is very structured, and no 2 days really ever look the same, because I just kind of create that schedule as the days get closer to fit what best works with my schedule. But I will say one thing that is super consistent is the first 90 days are mine. There's never anything scheduled from 5:30 until 7. That 90 minutes is when I wake up, when I exercise, when I put the right foods in my body, when I meditate, when I journal, and then I sit down, and then I'm ready for the rest of the day. So for me, it's all about action the first 90 minutes on me, on improving myself before I start reacting to the world out there. And I think that's really critical.
Yeah, create before you consume.
Ooh,
yeah, I know.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to give you credit for it twice, Lawrence, and then I'm going to own it.
Yeah, do it for sure. So you are an influencer, you are an authority in podcasting. How does that make you feel? What pressure does that put on you, and how possibly has that changed your mindset from where you were, maybe 12, 18 months ago?
I don't really feel any pressure, to be honest. I really just feel the desire to continue to produce valuable content. That's my goal. Like I do this because I enjoy it and because I want to keep doing it. So that is really what gets me up every morning and what makes me find more ways to produce valuable content. Like I'll tell you right now, I am obsessed with Snapchat. No, it's not for teenage girls. If you think it is, you're way behind the 8 ball. Catch up. It's 2016. Snapchat is the best social media platform out there. I am 100% convinced of that. You can follow me, eofire.com/snap. That'll take you right to my Snapchat, which is just daily value bombs. I love interacting with my audience that way. I love following people that I admire in that way. It's just an incredible way that you, as an actually authority figure, can continue to create content on that. So I don't feel any pressure. I just am continuing to look at fun ways to continue to provide more content to my audience in different ways.
So I'm thinking that you've already purchased freesnapchatcourse.com.
Of course.
For sure. And has that, influence and authority role made any sort of, big differences to your daily life, or to your, are you able to go and speak more? Is that sort of, what you want to do? Or is, what does the sort of future hold for JLD and EoFire before we wrap things up today?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to speak more. That is way low on my list of priorities or desires. I'll probably speak at a couple places a year that really do, I think, make sense. And that would be like podcast movements, like conferences like that.
Yeah.
But for me, I want to stay home. I want to be in a tank top. I want to be in shorts. I want to be in front of my computer. I'm having conversations like this, like we're having, and producing content in the areas that I want to produce. I don't want to be on somebody else's time schedule, flying places, waiting to get on stage and having to come home. Like that's just not me. And that's for some people, and that's great for them. but it's not for me. And that's great for me. So I think you really need, as an entrepreneur, to realize what it is that, that really lights your fire, and then craft your life around that. Because a lot of people will say, but that's scary because I have to do this to generate revenue. Well, believe me, you will be more successful doing what you really find lights you up inside than doing what you think you have to do to generate that revenue. And that's what I found all of my life, and it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, for sure. So if you could wrap that all up into one value bomb for us, what would you like to say to the more demanders right now to get started on their podcasting journey?
Simple quote: if you want to be, do. I wanted to be a podcaster back in 2012. I had no experience, no skills. I was not good at any of that, but I podcasted. I wanted to be a podcaster, so I podcasted. What is it that you want to be in life? Do you want to be a presenter from stage? Well, get on every single stage you can in your local area, Toastmasters, Rotary Club, whatever it is, speak. You have to do that thing you want to do. It's a very simple equation. Make it happen.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, John, for being on the show today and helping the more demanders get started with launching a podcast.
It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. I'll be back with another feature-packed episode next Wednesday. Until then, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the More Demand podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes and get the latest episode direct to your device every Wednesday.